Hi. So today's presentation will be addressing the questions where memory is stored in the brain. So mutable memory system is a theory in the field of memory research which proposed that memory is not stored in one or more specific region of the brain, but it cut across different brain domains. So the objectives of this study is to examine the process of memory encoding, storage, and retrieval in different brain regions and how the system are interconnected and works together for processing different types of memory. The first source explore about the medial temporal lobe, and it include the hippocampus and its adjacent cortex. Um, the research draws on memory impairment models in rats, monkey, and human patients, as well as neurophysiology and neuroimaging. In the lesson model, uh, the research found that when damage is limited to the hippocampal region, the result is moderate. However, when the damage is both to the hippocampus and its adjacent cortex, the impairment is severe. However, the patients still have intact immediate memory, perceptual ability, and intellectual function, therefore perform well and normal on intellectual tests and also short-term memory tests. This also suggests that this research is only exclusive to declarative memory or explicit memory. There's also demonstration about the division of labor inside the temporal medial lobe, which also support the idea of mutable memory system. It's also posed that in order to maintain long-term memory, it needs to be operate with the neocortex. The second source that I found explore on the connectionist model of learning and memory, which involve two systems, which is the neocortical processing system and the hippocampal memory system. The neocortical processing system is primarily concerned with adaptive learning and some skill learning, which is mostly happen in the cerebellum and the basal ganglia. It is specialized for gradual discovery of shared structure of events and experience, whereas the hippocampal memory system is necessary for the rapid storage of episode events, therefore is essential for working memory. So when a pattern of neuroactivity arises in the hippocampus, it is potentially to become a stable memory, which can be explicitly recalled and recognized. Similarly, if a pattern arises in a neocortical system, it is likely to be translated into the corresponding pattern that is previously restored in the hippocampus. Information used for reinstatement and consolidation is transferred by bidirectional pathway between the two systems in both feed-forward and feedback terms. Reinstatement can consciously occur during active state, for example, rehearsal, but it can also occur unconsciously during inactive state, such as sleep. This process would allow the stored informations to be used for subsequent control of behavioral response. Consolidation also provide an incremental change to neocortical connection that over time the memory initially dependent on the hippocampus will become independent of it. It also suggests the process binding, which is a theory where the hippocampal system does not store the memory itself, but rather store a list of address or pointer to location in the neocortex. And this list of location need to be sufficient enough to reconstruct the initial events. The third source that I found is this empirical review of imaging cognition. They draw their conclusions upon neuroimaging data and conclude that memory processing happen across all brain domains, namely frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, occipital lobe, the cerebellum, and the basal ganglia. They also talk about the HERA model, which is hemispheric asymmetries of memory. According to HERA, the left prefrontal cortex is more involved in memory encoding, whereas the right hemisphere is more involved in retrieval in the case of episodic memory. In its conclusion, they also have this division of labor between different types of memory. And there are several systems involved. However, they overlap each other. For example, here we have working memory. It's almost always prefrontal, but also partial and occipital, episodic, frontal, semantics and memory, frontal. So there's overlapping each other. One notable thing is that semantic memory and episodic memory processing is closely associated because semantic retrieval leads to new memory storage. Moving into evaluations of sources. Note that all three sources draws on memory impairment model and neuroimaging data. Therefore, they share some commonalities. First, memory lesson research is the traditional form of memory research because neuroimaging data is not possible yet. But with the lesson research, it's difficult to differentiate the neural correlates between encoding and retrieval. On the other hand, neuroimaging data allows separate measure of brain activity during encoding and retrieval. However, there's some limitation to neuroimaging data as well, because the data are contrastive, which means they are almost always dependent on the control variable or the baseline task. Second, the neuroimaging data is correlational, which means it's not really providing evidence, but more like suggestion about if the necessity of a particular function or a particular structure. Encoding and retrieval occur in specific point of time, which is easy to measure. However, the consolidation and reinstatement process is not. Therefore, it is not a amenable function in neuroimaging research. For the first source, we have the impairment pattern in monkeys and rats, and they are not generalizable to the human model. Also, there's little support for the sharp distinction between the division of labor for encoding retrieval. The second source posts about the connectionist model, which offer a very different perspective and also a very different way to generalize knowledge from one concept to another. However, with the research, they have relatively small sample size, so it might not represent or generalize to the larger population. With the empirical review, they admittedly say that they have emphasized consistency, but because of this, it have a high rate of generalizability. And one important implication of this empirical review is that it cut across brain domains, which allows an analysis of occurrence of regional activations. In conclusion, according to existing evidence, it is difficult to conclude if memory is stored in one or more specific region of the brain. Prior research has supported the idea that memory encoding and retrieval occur in specialized regions for different memory types and modality, whereas storage is spread throughout the system. And this is my reference. And this is the end of the presentation. Thank you.